Hey everyone, welcome to this chess video. So in this one we'll be looking at a Christmas tournament from 1928. And so this is pretty much exactly 95 years ago. So right around this season there was this Christmas tournament and we have a really fascinating miniature, so I thought I'd share it with everyone. So first we have e4, pretty common opening. We have e6, d4, and then d5. And most people know this is actually the French defense. The reason I mention the opening is because although we get kind of French structures, we actually reach a transposition a little bit later where it actually transposes to a type of Sicilian opening. So we'll take a look at that when we get there. So here we have the advanced variation with pawn to e5. We have c5, all this very thematic French defense ideas. We have c3. And then from here, a lot of people, they choose to maintain the tension. They'll usually play a move like knight to c6, possibly ideas long-term like queen. And we're really just trying to gang up on the center here and really put pressure on white center. So that's kind of the whole idea behind this French defense type opening. Now in this game, we actually have c captures, and then we have c captures back. And the reason I mention this here is because when you've traded like this, we're actually now in a Sicilian type of position that could happen by a different move order. So I can go back and show what that would look like here. In the Sicilian, it would probably start like this, where you have e4, then you have c5, and then c3, which is the Alpine Sicilian, then e6, d4, c takes, and then finally d5, and of course then pawn advancing to e5. And now after all of that, you'll notice this position and the position we're in the game are both the exact same position. And so this could happen in a different move order. But nevertheless, most people will say it's more of a French defense, has the ideas more characteristic of that, and we'll see how play goes from here. Now, I think what was probably better for black is to try and play the same French defense ideas. Probably play a move like knight to c6, and I think they're in really good shape here, and just add more and more pressure to the center. Now, instead of that, black actually chose a move that I don't really like too much, which is bishop to b4 check. And the idea is, of course, they're trying to get their bishop out with a tempo, because they're attacking the king with check, and maybe that can help them bring this knight out, and then get castled really early. Now, the reason I don't like this move is because it's not so clear if the bishop is actually best on this square. And so the very natural move to block this is probably knight to c3. Why not? And so the problem is after knight c3, you really don't want to take this knight. And the reason you want to take is because pawn takes, this is actually going to favor white. Now, I actually did another chess video where I actually show why that kind of idea is actually a mistake. So if you want to check that out, I'll put the thumbnail on the screen, and then you can look at and throw out my channel, see if you can locate that video, and then realize why this is a mistake, because it's much more deep than just maintaining the tension. There's also other problems that come about when you take the knight like that. But okay, let's continue with the game. So here we have knight to c6, now adding pressure to the center, that's fine. We have a developing move, knight to f3, which is also a fine move. Now if we were to go back here, what the engine actually prefers is to play bishop to d3 first. Just a little move order difference. And then of course there's a common French defense idea where this pawn is actually not, hanging, because if you were to bring out your, piece here, this would actually be a mistake. Very common idea, because now you have queen to g4. And you're already exploiting the fact that this bishop is no longer where it should have been, guarding this pawn, and now you're forking this pawn, but you're also forking this knight. So that's a very common French defense pattern that comes up. But instead we have knight to f3, which is fine. We will get bishop to d3 a little bit later. Fine move. Now we have bishop d3, and so far this looks pretty normal opening stuff. I'd say the position is roughly equal. Now here black actually makes a mistake, which is normally a good move, but in this case it's a mistake. So the move, of course, is actually castling. So in this case it's a mistake because it walks into one very common sacrifice pattern, which I'm sure many people are familiar with. That pattern is known as the Greek gift. So in this game we actually have bishop captures h7, really strong check, and so if they don't do anything, they just move their king over to here. I'll just play it on the board just to show it. Then you just defend your bishop, your queen is coming to h5, and your king is under severe pressure in this attack. Now instead of that, most often when we go back, they're probably going to play king captures h7, as we have in the game. But now you follow up with this very thematic knight to g5 move, and very similar to what we looked at, if the king ever comes back, you have queen h5, and you just have a very strong attack, already threatening checkmate in one move if they don't do anything. So here after knight to g5, what we have is king to g6 instead. Kind of scary looking how your king is coming up the board, but, that's what they tried to defend with here. And now there's many good moves. H4 is a very solid move they play, just simply anchor the knight even more. Some lines are even threatening to play, pawn sacrifice here, and then the queen can come in, supported by the rook on H1. There's a lot of attacking ideas here you have to be very careful for. Another idea is possibly queen to D3 or queen G4 in some lines, and this king is just really exposed. White is much better here because that Greek gift sacrifice that we already saw. But okay, so now they play knight captures D4. Some attempt to try and give back the material while also destroying the center. If white were to capture back, that's actually the best move according to the computer, and material's equal, but, black's king is still really exposed. Now here, instead of that, we have also another strong move, where instead of taking the knight, white actually chose to play queen to G4. And after queen G4, obviously there's threatening a lot of ideas to this discover attack. Whenever this knight moves, this king is going to be under check, and possibly some tactics against it. Now this actually set up a really beautiful idea, because here we have the mistake pawn to F5. And this is a mistake because now, even though our queen is hanging, you don't have to move this queen immediately. So it's actually a really cool idea where you can play a forced checkmate in 3 here. So if you want, you can take a look at this position, give you a few seconds to see it, and then if not, then I'll continue with the game, and you'll see this really nice checkmate. Okay, so hopefully you had a few seconds to take a look at that. So here the really cool idea starts with pawn to H5 check. And now the king really can't go anywhere other than H6. There's really no other legal moves. You have to go king H6. So that's what they play. And now after that, you have a really nice idea. Knight captures to E6 check, because they got the bishop here. And so they must move something here, have to block on that diagonal. Now if they were to just play something like, say F4 to block the check, well, queen captures G7 is going to be a checkmate. So they don't want to block that way. If you try something else, say king back, to H7, still the same idea, this can be checkmate. But here we have a really pretty idea that ended the game, which was pawn to G5. Looks really, like a better idea because you no longer have the queen ideas on G7. So it looks like it stops the check and stops the checkmate threat. But in fact it doesn't, because now we have a very cool, nice checkmate in 1. That's right, en passant checkmate with H captures G6. It's just so rare for an en passant checkmate to ever happen, and so most people probably don't know that this is actually a famous Christmas tournament game that ended up happening with this cool checkmate. So it was a nice little miniature. I hope everyone found that really instructional, or at the very least a really pretty, checkmate. Thanks for stopping by. I'll see you in the next chess video.